Hello everyone, my name is Joris Peels and this is another edition of 3D Printing News Unpeeled. Today we're going to be talking about trachea. So there's been a lot of research going on 3D printed trachea over many years now. There's two reasons for this, and one is that it's a very exciting area to explore because the trachea is a relatively simple construct. It's an upper airway construct. A lot of people have kind of trauma or they have cancer or some kind of condition that makes this trachea not function very well, and it seems like a pretty easy thing to fix compared to a lot of other structures that are below or lower in the lung and things like this. So people have been using it, one, because it might be a really interesting area in and of itself, and the other way, it's kind of the gateway to the lungs and other kind of more complex structures. And what they've been doing is trying to make splints, removable splints, resorbable splints, actual trachea that are seeded with cells that are meant to completely be replaced. And this has been going on in, well, a lot of mice, frankly, for a very long time. But we've seen very few work kind of percolate through into patients. And now we're seeing some of that happening in the States, which is a really, really good kind of sign. We see in reabsorbable medicine, so 3D printing a part that reabsorbs into the body, so there's no permanent implant, there's nothing that needs to be removed. And the tissue kind of heals itself, using the stent or the scaffold or this part to kind of heal itself in a better way, is an incredibly kind of cutting edge, interesting area where we see Lattice Medical, for example, Belliceno work in things like breast implants or other types of materials as well. So in that area, it's really exciting, but we've seen all these other things go further than trachea are going. But now the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta has been offering a trachea splint. Now it's a bioresorbable material. We don't know what it is exactly. It's probably PCL, polycaprolactone, which is a really good material for splints and bioresorbability. And it may also be like a Reservable material from Evonik's portfolio if they use powder bed fusion, which would be a very obvious thing to do in this case, in this procedure. And what has happened now is they've given this procedure, they've gotten clearance to this procedure for one kid under the FDA's expanded access program. Now, expanded access means it's not a regular kind of approved safe device. It's just kind of for edge cases or difficult cases where there are a few alternatives available, let's say. So this is not something you can go in and get. Even if your child will be suffering from this, there need to be some extenuating circumstances, some difficult things happening. In this case, it's just better breathing. There's a condition called pediatric tracheomalacia, which essentially calls a weak, in an article it describes a floppy kind of trachea and airway that collapses under its own kind of weight and under its own kind of action of breathing. So imagine kind of like a balloon, kind of like when we're entering air and sucking air out really quickly. Imagine your trachea is like that and kind of collapses on itself the whole time. That would be terrifying, by the way, on the one hand. On the other hand, also, it's very debilitating long-term to have something like this, to have issues with your breathing. And on top of this, the only thing they can do is not really a treatment. They put these kids on ventilators for a very, very long time. And there isn't really a solution. And sometimes a child can spend years on ventilators, which in and of itself causes other problems as well. Not even psychosocial, and the fact that they can't develop and really go around doing things, or spend a lot of time hanging out with siblings or the families or friends and stuff, but also just in the body that changes a lot of things negatively as well. So years ago, back in 2018, Georgia Tech and Children's worked on a procedure of doing this. Then in that case, it was a 10-hour surgery from a team of like world-class physicians from all sorts of disciplines working together. So super not standard thing at all. Very exciting procedure to do these splints at the time. But now, years later, they're moving more and more into making this available in a more broader way. Now, again, not super broad or anything like that, but still kind of to a certain extent broader. So that's a good piece of news, I think. And this area could be huge. Like Belliceno and Lattice are using it for breast implants, for example. It calls a breast implant that doesn't have to be in your body forever. And there can be lots of applications in plastic surgery. There can be lots of applications in trauma and cancer. All sorts of things like that. So this is an area we should watch. And for a lot of these guys, they start with the trachea, but they really want to do a lot of other stuff that they can be replacing or splinting further in the body. The next piece of news comes from Purdue, where Xinghang Zhang and Anyu Shang, and a whole bunch of other people, by the way, have come up with an aluminum, a 3D printed aluminum strategy, essentially, to make ultra-strong and highly deformable aluminum. That is, means it gets strengths up to 700 MPa, and this work has been published in Nature Communications and funded by the National Science Foundation and the Office of Naval Research, which of course is very obvious because for a lot of marine, structural, Air Force, and other military parts, aluminum is an incredibly useful material that is used very, very widely. The paper is called Additive Manufacturing Ultrastrong Deformable Aluminum Alloy with Nanoscale Intermetallics. And this is very cutting edge stuff. It's been patented and they're looking for licensees for it. And I don't know if they're going to find anyone to do this, but I don't think they'll have a shortage of interest because this could be a material that could be quite cost effective and be high performing. That's because aluminum we could normally run very, very quickly in the machine. So the powder actually spends less time in the machine, the part spends less time in the machine because it's actually much, much cheaper. And that makes aluminum very advantageous and very, very popular material, much more so than a couple of years ago in powder bed fusion. Now, the next bit of news is has to do with HP's color 3D printer. Now, if you remember, a few years ago, HP had a HP 580 multi-jet fusion line of printers. These are color printers, and a lot of people really love them. And HP decided to axe the collection to streamline their units and get rid of the color, essentially. Now, some people, like Brent Wright is a friend of mine, he, and his team at Advanced 3D, they decided to buy a bunch of these printers that were discontinued, knowing fully well that 5 years from now or something like that, they won't be supported anymore. Now, he took that risk because he's in the prosthetics business. At Advanced 3D, they make prosthetics. And for prosthetics, it's really important for kids, adults, everyone, to get them in a really cool color, to make them yours, if you will. And so for certain people, having them in the color of your favorite sports team, or having them in the color you choose, or some kind of cool thing that you had a hand in, makes this thing much more yours. It makes you own it more. It makes you kind of feel more comfortable with the prosthetic overall. So, having said this, that they did it with a couple of machines, and they did it because their customers like it. Now, what Custom Color 3D is doing, now they're called is doing this in an incredible scale. So, Custom Color 3D printing, they're now changed their name to Mass Persona, and they've got a bunch of these things. Now, I don't know how many. I remember at the time, a couple of years ago, I'm kind of obsessed with these guys, reading about them, and they had somewhere close to I think 40 or 60 of these things. Now imagine this. Would you do this? This is like the question I would like to ask you. Would you buy a bunch of printers that are color machines that have a unique capability, but will be discontinued in 5 years? That to me is a very risky thing. It's a very entrepreneurial thing to want to do this and to do this. And I think it's really great that these guys are actually doing this. And what they're hoping to do is have a service to customize at scale. Now, what they're doing, they've now done a name change, they're offering more engineering services, and their idea is that you, as a toy maker, a designer, somebody like that, would go to them and get them to make colorful things using these MGF printers. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic when people do things when they zig when others zag. And I think it's absolutely fantastic these guys are doing this, and I hope they do some really, really cool, really successful applications. And this is it for me from today. My name is Joris Peels, and this was another edition of 3D